You're not alone. There are so many kids, especially post-pandemic, who are really struggling developmentally. And we're also in the middle of a youth mental health crisis. Let's be clear. Think differently about your kids. Realize it's about skill, not will. Realize that your kids are trying their best to manage their behavior with the skills they have. Any problem you have with your kid, you've got three options. We're trying to solve a problem, practice and build skills, and build relationship at the same time. You better be in the business of listening hard, empathically, and non-judgmentally, and trying to collaborate with them, not impose your will, to work towards a goal that they care about as well.
First of all, this is my voice. I'm Tim Green, and I have ALS. This podcast is not about ALS or living with disabilities. I don't want you to feel sorry for me. I don't feel sorry for me. I am a father of 5 with a marriage that's lasted for over 33 years. I am a #1 New York Times best-selling author of 41 books, an NFL first-round pick with an 8-year career. I worked on TV for Fox Sports, Good Morning America, Court TV, and Extra. I've hosted BattleBots, A Current Affair, and Find My Family. And I am also a practicing attorney. In this podcast, we're diving into real-life stories. From triumphs to trials, we'll explore the extraordinary in the ordinary. Join me, Tim Green, and my son Troy each week for real conversations, laughter, and insights. Because life is a journey, and everyone's got a story. My voice in today's episode is powered by 11 Labs. We're going to do something different today because of our guest, Dr. Stuart Ablon, who will change your life if you let him. It's not difficult. It's basically a 3-step process that will enhance your relationship with your kids, spouse, boss, co-workers, or anybody else. You will feel good, and so will they. This is not a gimmick. Dr. Ablon spent decades studying the human brain at Harvard University Medical School, and he's been kind enough to share with our listeners today. Welcome to our podcast, Doctor.
Thank you very much, Tim. It's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate you having me on and looking forward to the discussion.
What inspired you to pursue a career in clinical psychology, particularly focusing on challenging behaviors in children and adolescents?
Well, so I grew up as a child of 2 mental health professionals. My dad is a psychiatrist and my mom a psychologist, and they both worked with, and still work with actually, kids and adolescents. So it was something I was exposed to my whole life. And, usually having 2 mental health professionals as parents is like big trouble. You're pretty worried about most children if they have two mental health professionals as parents, but I like to think I turned out halfway okay. But I was always very interested as a result of my parents' work. I went to graduate school actually thinking, Tim, that I was going to spend most of my time studying what about different kinds of therapy help people. Because one of the most fascinating sort of results people were finding is that lots of different kinds of therapy were helpful for various things, and they were about equally effective. There weren't many differences, even though the approaches were rather different. They were, equally effective. And people were sort of puzzled by that. And I was really interested in studying what about therapy between different human beings is helpful? Like, what are the active ingredients? And so I went to UC Berkeley, actually, to study that. And at the same time, I connected with another mentor who was working with kids with what we call externalizing behavior, which is like a lot of very challenging behavior. And I was really struck by what I was learning in these sort of 2 different worlds. On the one end, I was learning that there's really only one reliable sort of factor that seems to predict good outcomes in any kind of therapy, and it's responsible for most of the change we see in therapy. And that is the degree of helping relationship between the therapist and their client. The degree of helping relationship is like the magic ingredient, and it cuts across all forms of therapy. So I was learning about that, and simultaneously I was watching people deal with really tough kids, mostly by using rewards and consequences to try to change their behavior. which means you're sort of like leveraging the power you have over kids to try to change their behavior. And I was thinking to myself, wait a sec, that doesn't sound like a great way to build a helping relationship, which seems to be the thing that's most effective here. Maybe we need to go about this a very different way. And I was lucky when I actually graduated from my program, got my PhD. I came to Mass General Hospital, where I've been for decades since, in the Department of Psychiatry here in Boston, and Harvard Medical School for my fellowship. And I met another guy who was working on the same issue, but coming to it from a different angle, Dr. Ross Green, that I worked with for over a decade. And we were sort of putting our heads together and really thinking a lot about what would it look like to take a very different approach to working with challenging behavior. And that's how I got into this area.
Can you share with us the story behind the development of the collaborative problem-solving approach? Was there a defining moment that led you to this model?
So I think, Tim, it wasn't so much a defining moment as these different experiences that I was having were building towards it. And then, my grandfather always used to tell me that, it's always about being in the right place at the right time. You got to sort of make the most of it. But I was in the right place in the right time in the sense that the guy I told you about, Dr. Ross Green, was writing a book called The Explosive Child, which was really taking a different look at explosive behavior. And I was coming, at it from a perspective of thinking about what kinds of therapy are effective and how can we sort of apply that to interactions with kids. And it created sort of a little bit of a perfect storm. And, I got to tell you, all the families I've worked with over the years whose kids, adult kids, struggle with their behavior, they all want to know very practically, like, what can I do to help? And the first thing that, I think is so important is you need to sort of understand what gives rise to challenging behavior in the first place. Because if you misunderstand why we humans struggle with our behavior, you'll miss the mark in trying to address things.
You've worked with diverse groups, parents, educators, clinicians, and juvenile justice professionals. How have these experiences shaped your understanding of behavioral challenges?
Yeah, so what's interesting about the opportunity that I've had, which I feel so fortunate for, because like you said, Tim, I've had the opportunity to work in all these different settings. And we're talking with like little kids in preschools up to like adults in psychiatric hospitals to correctional facilities. And what's fascinating to me is, literally, whether you're talking about preschool or you're talking about like an adult correctional facility, we tend to fall back on this notion that, behavior is all about trying hard enough to behave well. And as long as kids or adults or anybody are motivated to sort of manage their behavior effectively, they will. And it's sort of amazing because wherever I go, whatever group I work with, when I help them try to understand all the things that go into managing our behavior as a human, they all have the same experience where they're all like, wow, that makes a tremendous amount of sense. And I can't believe we haven't thought of it this way. It's sort of like a mindset shift that opens up a whole new way of thinking about people's roles, and it cuts across all those settings. And I got to tell you, when I do exercises to try to have people practice what I'm describing to them, and I ask them for their feedback, the feedback sounds very similar, again, whether it's a preschool classroom or a correctional facility. And that part is fascinating because it says that what we're talking about here is universal to development across the lifespan and universal to the human experience.
Tell us what it is. Please explain it for anyone who hasn't ever heard you speak before.
So when I'm talking about this mindset shift, what I'm talking about is that most people, as I mentioned, they view behavior through the lens of motivation. And the way we like to sum it up is we like to say that most people think it's as simple as people do well if they want to, or applied to kids do well if they want to. And if they're not doing well, it must be because they don't want to, or they're not trying hard enough. And so if they're not managing their behavior well, what we should do is we should try to supply that motivation. And generally, we do that with rewards, punishments, things like that. Now, the mindset shift that we try to teach is we tell people, you know what? It's not as simple as people do well if they want to. A much more accurate way of looking at behavior is to embrace a viewpoint that people do well if they can, not people do well if they want to, that everybody wants to do well. And actually, behavior is driven much more by skill than by will. That our human behavior is shaped much less by just how much effort we put into behaving, but much more by the skills that we have. Because managing our behavior involves skills like problem-solving skills, flexibility skills, frustration tolerance skills, things like that. So what we teach people is whether you're talking about a preschool, whether you're talking about your workplace, whether you're talking about your marriage, whether you're talking about a school, behavior is about skill, not will. And you know what? People who struggle to manage their behavior, they're actually trying harder than anybody else to behave themselves well because it doesn't come naturally to them. We all want to behave well. It's a question of whether we have the skills and can use them when they're most needed.
Okay, so the whole CPS model is built on the idea that kids do well if they can, not if they want to. How did you arrive at this principle, and why is it so transformative in addressing challenging behaviors?
Well, so the way that we arrived at this notion of kids do well if they can, or honestly any of us, people do well if they can, is really through decades of research. And believe it or not, there's been like 40 plus years of research now in the neurosciences really studying what we call the neuropsychology, how our brains work, the neuropsychology behind challenging behavior. And what we've seen for a long time now is if you took a whole bunch of kids who struggled with their behavior and gave them all what we call neuropsychological evaluations to study how their brains work. And you compared the results of those evaluations to hundreds of kids who were doing just fine with their behavior, you would see these huge differences in areas that I was mentioning, areas like problem solving, flexibility, frustration tolerance. So it's not really like a mindset that's just sort of a kinder way of thinking about things. It's really rooted in science, that when people struggle to manage their behavior, it's because they're struggling to apply thinking skills, what we call neurocognitive skills. So, that's how sort of we arrived at this notion of kids do well if they can, because it's not a lack of motivation. It's a lack of skill when kids are struggling to manage their behavior. And the philosophy kids do well if they can is just a powerful way of trying to remind everybody of that and articulate that.
What role do cultural differences play in implementing CPS, and how did you adapt the approach for different communities?
So this is a fantastic question, Tim, and something we've been spending a lot of time on. Do these principles that I'm talking about sort of apply, across different cultures? Is this something that needs to be sort of adapted to meet the needs of different communities, different cultures? And to be honest, I don't even really like thinking about it that way because, it's not for me to say whether something, should be adapted a certain way to feel like it's a good fit and useful for a person, a community, a family. It's up for that family. It's up for that community to sort of decide. And one of the nice things about collaborative problem solving is it's about collaboration. And so when we share these ideas with different communities, what we look for is, well, how does that sound to you? Does it resonate with you? Does it make sense? Where do you think it doesn't make sense? And in essence, encourage people to take these ideas, try them on for size, and make them their own in ways that are useful to them. Now, having said that, there are some communities, there are some cultures in which there's a much more of an emphasis on what I would call sort of more authoritarian styles of parenting, for instance, or of teaching. Can you use an approach like this in that context? Absolutely. Because, in cultures that sort of value a more authoritarian sort of stance, you still will have plenty of instances where that style of parenting is not getting your expectations met, or where kids are still struggling. And it still comes down to that basic question then of, okay, what's getting in the kid's way? And if it's not a lack of motivation, we might be needing to look at handling things differently. So, this approach, which we'll get into more detail about, I think it has a fair amount of cultural humility to it, is I guess what I'm saying, Tim, because it's an approach that's about being open-minded. It's about listening to other people. It's about understanding their perspective, their point of view, and not forcing any perspective, point of view, set of techniques upon another. And I think that provides some protection when it comes to not trying to impose a bias on someone or a community, for instance.
What advice do you have for parents who are overwhelmed by their child's challenging behaviors and feel like nothing works?
Well, so first thing I would say to parents who are overwhelmed by their kids' behavior, and I get daily emails from parents describing all kinds of overwhelming struggles. First thing I would say is you're not alone. There are so many kids, especially post-pandemic, who are really struggling developmentally. We're also in the middle of a youth mental health crisis, let's be clear. So there are so many kids who are struggling and so many adults who are in the same place that you are. Now, when I hear that from parents, we've sort of tried everything and we're at our wits' end, that often means they've tried medication, perhaps. They've tried different forms of therapy, and they've tried trying to motivate their kids to behave better. And so one piece of hope that I think this approach affords is if you've been working really hard to try to incentivize your kid to behave better and you just can't find the right motivator, well, learning that maybe it's not about motivation at all, and actually maybe your child is already trying very hard to behave themselves well, that could be very freeing. So if you've got a little kid, you could drop the sticker chart. If you've got an adolescent, you can get away from, lording things over them like being grounded or access to the car or things like that, and shift your focus entirely to trying something very different. And most people haven't tried what we describe when we talk about collaborative problem solving. And that is a pretty big departure from the conventional ways of working out there. So in other words, long-winded way of saying, I think there's some hope out there if you look at the problem through a very different lens and are willing to try something very different.
So what is the approach? Please let us know what to do with our kids.
We've been building up to this by saying, all right, the first thing to do is think differently about your kids. Realize it's about skill, not will. Realize that your kids are trying their best to manage their behavior with the skills they have. And then what we want you to think about is, like I mentioned a moment ago, any problem you have with your kid, you've got three options. And we want you to put less of your effort into option number one, what we call plan A, trying to impose your will to make your child do what you want them to do. We want you to put more of your effort into what we call plan B, which is when you collaborate to solve the problem with a kid. And if needed, in spots, you can use what we call plan C, which is when you decide to drop an expectation or solve a problem the way your kid wants it handled, which isn't a long-term solution, but can decrease the challenging behavior that's happened. But let's get into the sort of meat of it here. This thing, plan B, what I call collaborative problem solving. What's it look like? 3 steps, okay? It's not rocket science, 3 steps. First step we call the empathy step. And the empathy step is probably the hardest of the 3, okay? And I'm going to spend a little time on it. But in essence, it's where you try to get your child's perspective, their point of view, their concern on the table, or what's hard about a situation from their perspective. And only once you do that, do you move to the second ingredient where you share your perspective, your concern as their parent, what you're worried about, why you're bringing this up in the first place. And only once you have both sets of concerns, theirs in the first ingredient, yours in the second ingredient, do you move to the third ingredient, where you invite them to collaborate with you, to try to solve the problem together with you, not in a way that you're happy with, but in a way that you're both happy with, because you now have both sets of concerns on the table. Now, sounds easy, okay? 3 ingredients, how hard can it be? It's tough. But I'll tell you this, it's primarily tough because of the first ingredient, the empathy ingredient. Empathy does not mean saying to your kid like, hey, I can see you're really upset about this, or something like that. That's not empathy, okay? Empathy means to try to understand. And so in the first ingredient, what you're doing is you're being a detective, and you're trying to really gather information from your child to understand whatever problem it is you're trying to work on from their point of view. And I always tell people, you don't have to agree with that. Okay, empathy doesn't mean agreeing or disagreeing. Like, I can give you examples where we've worked with people who are floridly psychotic, completely psychotic. And when they tell you and you listen to them, it's totally delusional. But you can still hear it, you can still understand it. And so when it comes time for you to share your concern, you share yours, and then you can still problem solve together. You don't have to embrace their mindset, but you can still try to solve the problem in a way that actually accounts for their perspective and their point of view as well. So that first ingredient is the hardest.
Would you do this approach for like any and all situations come up? Or is this only for big issues? Meaning, is this for they want candy for breakfast, or is this only for they're going to do something that's going to hurt them, hurt somebody else?
So what I always encourage people to do is start with low-hanging fruit, honestly. Because it's hard to learn a different way of handling things with our kids over something that is really sort of heavy or the stakes are super high. So I usually suggest taking something that you feel pretty flexible about, isn't the hugest deal in the world, and starting there. And once you build a track record, so your kid also starts to recognize, oh, wait, when they say to me, hey, can I talk to you about something? That doesn't mean, look out, I'm in trouble. It means, oh, they're going to actually listen to me. But then they're going to ask me to listen to them, and then we're going to sort of work together on this. So in other words, take some easy ones first, get some successes under your belt, then you can take on some harder problems.
And does it start at a certain age? Like, is there an age where they're old enough to even comprehend the thought of working together on it versus just the...
Yeah. So what's really fascinating by this is people overestimate how old a kid has to be able to participate in a process like this. In other words, we underestimate kids. 3-year-olds who have decent skills for 3-year-olds can fully participate in this process. Believe it or not, a 3-year-old can communicate some basic ideas of their own, understand somebody else's point of view, and come up with some basic solutions to a problem. And we have applied it. What's that?
I got one more thing on this, and then I'm going to shut up and let you keep explaining it. But is this approach, the thought is that at the end result, you have 2 different timelines. You have we'll use my dad and I. Let's just say my dad parented by being, stern and tough on us and imposing the will. Let's say option A. And I go through with the exact same kids in the exact same scenario, but I use option B. Is the end result that you have kids or whatever relationship you're using it for, you have better mental health and better mental clarity? Or is it, I hate to say performance based, but that's what I'm thinking, is do you end up with do you end up with a higher achiever maybe if you go with option A because you're pushing them constantly, but maybe their happiness is lower? Whereas option B, you end up with somebody who, because in my life, like with my dad, he would push me a lot, and he did. I mean, all fairness, he did. There was a lot of option B too, but a lot of option A where I would be like, I'd rather just whatever play video games. I don't want, and he would push me to go work at something, and then that kind of instilled that habit of, okay, we have to, hard work and all this. But I think I probably would have been happier in the moment if I was inside on the couch. So I guess I'm curious about performance in life in the Western standards versus mental health How is that all tied together, or is it separated by those options?
So these are great questions. There's a lot packed in there. So let me unpack it a little bit. First of all, I want to be clear that there's nothing about deciding to collaborate with somebody else that means that you care less about the outcome, or that you're sort of less aggressive about making sure your concerns are getting addressed. Choosing what we call Plan B to collaborate with kids is not a weaker form. It's not like, okay, it's not collaborative compromising. It's collaborative problem solving. It's trying to solve a problem so that your concern as a parent gets addressed. It's just taking your kid's concern into account as well. So it's actually hard work. There's nothing lackadaisical about it. It doesn't produce soft kids. In fact, what the focus is on teaching kids how to become better problem solvers. Because here's one of the problems. If you always rely on imposing your will as a parent, okay, well, what's going to happen when your kid gets bigger and stronger than you? Like, all right, now they're going to impose their will on you. And by the way, if they are successful in the world and go out to be a leader in different ways and have their own kids, guess what they're going to do when they have a problem with them? They're going to impose their will. And I hate to say it, but like, if you look around the world these days, I don't think you can make a good argument that the human being has evolved in this tremendous way and that we do a wonderful job of getting along with each other across the world. Not at all. We're terrible at problem solving, us humans. And I'm not really surprised, though, because we don't really spend a lot of time teaching kids that when there's a problem, the best way to handle that problem is to try to listen to the other person. And you might not agree with them, but they probably have a valid perspective or point of view. And so do you. And if you want them to listen to you, the best way to get them to listen to you is by listening to them. And so in other words, what I'm saying is we can try to raise a next generation of kids that when there's a problem, instead of lining up and deciding who's bigger and stronger because that person's going to win, that could be a new generation that could be when there's a problem, they're going to go, hey, let me listen to you, hear what you got to say. And then you got to do the same with me. And now let's put our heads together and see if we can work towards win-win solutions. And that's the upside of doing it this way. Because if your kid has good skills, you can get away with imposing your will. You can push them. They might respond fine. But it does miss an opportunity to help practice a whole bunch of skills that I think are the skills we're in most need of in the world right now.
Can you guys please do me a favor? Troy will play the recalcitrant teenager in two scenarios. First, you want him to put his phone down. You're worried he's addicted to social media. In the second one, he's addicted to the sports gambling site FanDuel.
All right. So we're going to role play some common scenarios, it sounds like, right? The first one about addiction to social media, and the second one, spending too much time on FanDuel, right?
Yeah. All right. So we're role playing it out.
Yeah. So first, let's make an important point here. The worst time to solve a predictable problem is right when the problem is happening. So when Troy's got his phone and he's like scrolling, on Instagram interminably, that's not the time for me to try to solve that problem. Nor is it when he's trying to figure out whether he's about to press go on his latest bet on FanDuel. That's not the time to solve the problem. If it's a problem that's been going on for a while, I'm going to pick a time where it's not happening, where Troy's, pretty relaxed and chilling out, and we're going to have a proactive conversation. And it's going to start like this, with a neutral observation about the problem. Hey, Troy, I've noticed that in your downtime, you are, it seems to me, I could be wrong, but it seems to me that you're spending a lot of time scrolling on your phone. What's up with that? Is that true? Fill me in. What's going on?
Yeah, we're just sitting there. There's nothing going on. Why not? Just killing time.
Got it. So what you're saying is you do scroll a lot, but for you, it's like feels like you're just sort of filling time.
I'm probably doing as much as my friends are doing it. Probably nothing crazy.
Got it. So it sounds like you're saying you don't think it's necessarily a problem, huh?
No, I don't think it's a problem.
and you're doing it not any more than anybody else. But fill me in. So is it just like filling time because you're bored, like you got nothing better to do, or like why do you think you do it so much?
Yeah, just a minute here or there while we're waiting for something. Just filling time.
Got it. Okay. And do you enjoy it?
Yeah, it's whatever. I'm trying to sound like the team. Yeah, it's whatever.
It's whatever. Okay. But like, I don't get a great sense there. Like when you've been scrolling for a while, you're like, that was fun. That was cool. Or like, are there times you're like, that was annoying, or why did I do that? Or like, just doesn't seem that important either way to you.
Yeah, I don't think it's important either way. Just killing time.
Okay. All right. And are there other things that you find yourself doing besides social media to kill time, or like things you used to do before you were scrolling so much? What do you think?
Those things are more commitments, though. I like to do it just if I'm waiting in line or we're sitting there doing nothing. I'm sitting on the couch.
Got it. Okay. So you are basically filling time, particularly when there's like little pockets of time.
Yeah, and sometimes I scroll for too long, I'm sure, but it's really just to fill those little pockets.
Got it. Okay. So sometimes you'll scroll for too long, but it's filling a lot of little pockets. All right. I hear you. Now, by the way, let me pause here. All I've done is played detective. All I've done is try to ask you some questions, listen to you. When you say anything to me, try to reflect it back to you in my own words, make sure I got it correctly, and sort of reassure you along the way that I'm just trying to understand. And I've taken a few guesses in there when I'm trying to clarify things. That's all I did.
Yeah, you already have better patience than I do. I would be, if someone was saying it to me, I'd be like, anyways, keep going.
But you know why I'm doing this, by the way? Because we studied this for years.
Yeah.
And when people do a good job of empathizing, which is understanding, they're doing 4 things. They're asking questions, taking guesses if need be, reflecting what they've heard from the person, and also, if need be, providing some reassurance that they're just trying to understand. So I wasn't making that up as I went along. I was just following the script. Asked some questions. You told me some stuff. I reflected it back to you. I took a guess to try to clarify something, and I reassured you, hey, all right, I'm just trying to understand.
As you're having me say it over and over in my own head, and we're role playing, but I'm like, man, I feel like my argument's getting worse and worse. Every time I say it, I'm like, oh, geez, that doesn't sound good. It's not very convincing.
It's okay. It is what it is. But now we got your concern on the table. Now, to go to the second ingredient, as the parent, what I would tell the parent is before you even have this conversation, you got to reflect upon, why do you care? Like, why is this a problem? Why are you bringing it up? And I'll just make it up in this because of role play here. And let's say that I would say, well, my concern is that those little moments where you're just filling time, we used to talk. We used to talk about things. And now I look over at you and think I'm talking to you, and you're like this. And I feel like disconnected from you. Now, they may have different concerns than that, right? Their concern may be.
I think you're probably it for most scenarios. But
well, some parents would say to me, they'd be like, okay, I call BS on that. It's filling time, but I've also seen him when he had plenty of other things he could be doing, sitting there for an hour and a half and getting no better or smarter for it. Let's be clear. But you just got to be clear what your concerns are. Mm-hmm. So then if we're continuing the role play, I would summarize what I heard from you, raise my concern, and invite you to collaborate. And by the way, when I invite you to collaborate, notice I'm going to invite you to solve the problem in a way that works for both of us, not just me, or that would be me trying to collaboratively impose my will. So it would look like this. All right, so listen, I hear you. It sounds like you use social media to just fill little pockets of time where maybe you wouldn't be able to do anything else. And you feel like you don't do it any more than anybody else, and it's not really a problem. So sort of what's the big deal? I hear you. And I guess for me, I've just noticed that like there are times where I'm like, look over at you and I feel like I want to talk to you, or like maybe we could be doing something together, even if there's just a few moments. Maybe it's waiting in line. And if you weren't on your phone, I'd be like, we'd be talking about something. And the funny thing is, for me, we might be talking about the same stuff you're scrolling about. Like, we might be talking about the game last night, but instead of talking about it, we're sort of disconnected. And that doesn't feel so great to me. So I got two sets of concerns on the table. Ready? Here goes the third ingredient. So Troy, I guess I wonder if there's any way that, like, you could feel like you're able to fill the time that you have, that these little pockets that you feel sort of bored or just feel like filling the time with. And at the same time, you and I wouldn't lose out on some of these opportunities to sort of connect with each other. You got any ideas? What do you think that could look like?
I think the response would be something along the lines of, there's nothing to talk about, though. We talk about everything already. There's nothing to talk about.
So, and by the way, notice what I did. I gave you first crack at coming up with a solution. There's a bunch of reasons I do that. We can talk about that in a moment if you want. But whatever comes out of your mouth, whether it's the best idea in the world or the worst idea in the world, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to reflect what I heard from you and test it out with you. So you're saying that we got nothing really to talk about. So if I hear you, you're sort of like, why would we connect when, like, we've talked about everything, right?
Yeah.
Well, and so look, you may feel like we talked about everything. I guess I feel like I have plenty more I could talk to you about, and maybe you don't want to always, but we won't even. I guess we wouldn't know, if the phone's filling a lot of this time. So I don't know. I guess I just wonder if there's a way for you to enjoy social media as a time filler, but it also at the same time not sort of getting in the way of us connecting when maybe there's some chance we could. I don't know. What do you think?
I'm trying to think what the teen would say. So basically you're encouraging me to lead the dance and just slowly pushing is not the right word, but you keep inviting me to your side, but doing it in a way that doesn't feel like it's forced, right? I mean, well,
and I'm also trying not just to invite you to my side. What I'm trying to do is invite collaboration, because what I really want is a solution that is mutually satisfactory. I don't want to trick you into coming up with a solution that works for me but not for you. It just so happens in this example, you don't have a particularly strong perspective or point of view. You're just sort of like, meh, I'm filling the time with this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you were a kid who said, you're not filling the time, this is how I connect with my friends. Like, this is what we do. You don't get it because you're ancient. But like, if you were my age, this is like how we hang out. I know you guys used to, like, I don't know, would you like play with bottle caps or something? But like, for us, this is how we connect. So if you felt more strongly about that, it would be a little clearer when I'm collaborating that the solution would need to address both parties' concerns.
Got it.
And you're right that I'm letting you take first crack at it, because I want a few things. I want your investment. I want your buy-in. I want you to feel like co-author of the solution, because you'll be much more invested in it if it's something that you help develop. But I also want you to practice, because if you were somebody who's really struggling with their behavior, it's probably because you're struggling with some skills, and you could use some practice with problem-solving skills. And that's what we're doing right now. We're trying to solve a problem, practice and build skills, and build relationship at the same time.
And what are you working in this scenario? Are you working towards that in just hypothetically, your goal is to make it so when we have those short moments, I'm not pulling my phone out? Or would you try and say, hey, why don't you only do it if we're, again, I'm thinking on the fly, don't do it if we're eating food together. I don't want you pulling out your phone while waiting for food. But if we're in a line for something, it's no big deal. Or are you trying to go, because like in my brain, I'm thinking like for my own kids, I'm like, no social media if we're waiting for stuff. Like if you've got actual time, talk to me instead.
Yeah.
But it's option A.
Well, so if you're really doing plan B, you should know where the plane's going to land at the outset. If you already know where the plane's going to land and you're just trying to get your kids there, you're actually doing what I call tricky plan A. If you're really doing plan B, you're open to any potential solution, but it's got to be one that addresses your concerns too. So the answer to your question is, I'm not pulling towards anything. I don't know where it's going. I'm just trying to get somewhere where you feel like, all right, this time filler that I sort of like isn't taken away from me. And though at the same time, there's some more opportunity for connection. That could look like something you're saying, which is, all right, well, we won't do it when we're waiting for food. Or it could look like, you know what, I feel like I still want to do that when we're waiting for food and stuff, but why don't we find more times to connect that aren't these little pockets anyways? We used to shoot hoops a lot. Why don't we shoot hoops together in a way that we didn't before? Or, we used to, compare notes on articles we read or things like, whatever it is.
Sure.
It might be a different way of doing it. So it's not always just meeting in the middle. It's thinking creatively. And again, this is where you're practicing problem solving skills.
And playing this out another step, let's just say that we come to an agreement that I'm going to, I'm only going to use social media when I have downtime in the car or whatever. And then we're at the house later that day and, I'm there on social media. Now what do you do if I'm breaking the plan that we set?
Right.
Do you re-engage and redo steps 1, 2, and 3?
Yeah.
Do you use a little bit of option A to push it back to the agreement?
Yeah, I get this question all the time. And I think part of when parents are asking it, most parents are basically saying, hey, if they don't hold up their end of the bargain, can we go back into plan A then? And what I'm saying to them is, no, look, if the solution didn't pan out, it means either that somebody's concern wasn't really addressed, or you need a bit more tweaking and practice with it. And so you go back to it. You say, hey, I know we came up with a solution. Doesn't sound like it's working great. Let's talk about why, and let's figure out a better solution. And maybe it's the same solution. We just need to practice a little bit more. So you just go back and repeat the cycle. And let me be clear. As humans, we almost never solve a problem the first time out of the gates. Let's be clear. Anytime we come up with a solution, it takes some tweaking. We learn from what doesn't work and things like that. But no, the idea isn't just revert to plan A if your first stab at plan B doesn't work. And the other thing is, from working with a ton of families over the years, I can tell you it's not just kids who, quote, don't hold up their end of the bargain that they agreed to. It is often the parent that doesn't as well. And there are good reasons why, and that just becomes grist for the mill, if you will.
In a scenario that's more, I'll say, extreme, like sports gambling, right? You've got a high school kid or middle school kid that's on DraftKings or FanDuel or whatever, and they're gambling. I mean, that's to a point where it's probably doing actual. I mean, social media does too, so maybe not. I was just thinking, like, is there a scenario where you say, like, hey, we want to try and find collaborative solutions, but if they're going to do something that's, Jordan Peterson has this quote out there, and maybe it's a misquote, but I read it online, so it must be true. And he said, like, let your kids do anything they want unless they're going to harm somebody else or themselves. Like, that's part of growing up, is you try and whatever, jump off the stairs and you realize that if you jump from 3 stairs or more, it really hurts. Whereas if you is it?
Yeah. So as somebody who once thought that I could fly down an entire flight of stairs and decided to demonstrate that as my rest of my family was sitting ready to eat dinner and I was making my grand entrance. And let me tell you, you actually can't really fly very well down like 15 stairs when you're a child. And I ended up with a broken arm in 3 places. I'm not sure you always want to let your child, try everything. There's places where you need to intervene and use what we call Plan A. It's why, Plan A is not there in our approach as something just to say, no, don't do that, avoid it. It's there when you need it, and you can use it. And your comment, reminds me, I just wrote a parenting guide that's a companion guide to Mel Robbins' new book called The Let Them Theory. And the Let Them Theory, a big focus of it is about giving kids autonomy and letting them have some room to make mistakes and to learn from those mistakes. But, in that companion guide, we do talk about, and there are places where you actually need to step in as a parent. But I think our conversation today is hopefully reminding people stepping in as a parent doesn't always mean imposing your will. So you don't have to oscillate between impose your will or letting them do what they want. There is a third option. And that is working with them so that you're pursuing what's important to you as a parent and you're setting limits and there are boundaries there, but you're pursuing them collaboratively with your child.
Are there bright line rules where it's time to use option A if they're doing one of these X, Y, or Z, or is it?
Yeah, I mean, there's obvious things that you're saying as a parent. This crosses the line of things that are horribly unsafe. For my child to be doing. But what's really interesting is it sounds good to say, so that's going to be plan A. I always say to parents, what does that mean? Well, they can't use drugs. Okay. And how are you going to keep them from using drugs? Well, that's a non-negotiable. Okay. And so what happens if they're using drugs? What are you going to do? And all I'm trying to really point out is Plan A has its dramatic limitations when it comes to our ability to get away with imposing our will. And most parents have also experienced the more you try to impose your will to get a kid to not do something, the more attractive that very thing is for the kid to do. So I like to remind parents, and everybody else for that matter, the more important something is, the more concerning it is, does not mean the more you need to do Plan A. In fact, it's more important that you double down on your collaboration to try to solve the problem in an actually mutually satisfactory way that's going to be durable, because Plan A has its limitations.
And then I know I keep talking about ways to go around Plan B, but how many times do you go back to let's just use the sports gambling. We come to an agreement that we're only going to gamble on sports that we're watching together. So we're connecting and we're only going to do bets of making it $5 or less. That way it's not a big deal if we lose and whatever. Yeah. How many times do I break that? I don't hold up my end of the bargain before you would escalate that to something other than just, redoing those 3 steps.
Yeah. And again, I want to be clear. There's a place for Plan A. And let's say you are concerned that your child is becoming addicted to sports gambling. And first of all, they're losing a bunch of money, but also they're becoming, it's becoming this compulsion that's interfering with other parts of their life. You may need to take their phone away. You may need to make them delete the app, things like that. When I say there are limitations, though, let's be clear. If somebody's really, really addicted to sports betting, they're going to find a way to continue to bet on sports. They're probably going to do it by having their friend do it for them, for instance. So, I can't tell you how many times kids have sort of skirted Plan A that their parents try to impose. So in my mind, if the problem lives on after you tried Plan A, you're going to have to double down on Plan B.
Got it.
It is interesting, though, and I'm glad you made the observation yourself that you keep coming back to, but when can I use Plan A? Like, can I get your permission to use Plan A for this and that? And I would say to you, hey, it's your choice. You can use it whatever you want, but just be aware it's not magic. It has its big limitations. It doesn't build skills. It's not a great relationship builder. It doesn't solve problems in a durable way. And there's a whole bunch of things, even if we wanted to impose our will, we could try, but ultimately we're not going to be that successful. And the older the kid is, the bigger the problem is, the less ability we have actually to just impose our will.
My great grandma used to say, little kids, little problems, big kids, big problems.
You got it. Exactly.
But
which is why, by the way, kidding aside, the earlier you start collaborating with your child, the better, because when they become bigger, stronger, and have bigger problems, you will have a process in place that you can fall back upon, as opposed to trying to figure it out when things have already gotten dicey.
I never had the honor of being bigger, stronger, or faster than my dad, but I bet it would be really cool. If you've got it's skill and will, right? Then we know that they've got the will to succeed. Then we've got to focus on building the skills. But a portion of that is just your nature, right? So are there ways to, I guess there have to be ways, but again, I'm looking for the low-hanging fruit. I'm not the expert like you. If I'm trying to improve specific skills, or is the skill, when you're saying skill, is Is that skill problem solving, or is it all encompassing? Is it the skill of hard work, or the skill of empathy, or the skill of, that kind of stuff?
Well, so when I'm talking skills, I'm talking about the kind of skills that go into managing our behavior. And a lot of that is around problem solving, but it's not just problem solving. It's things like communication skills. It's things like your ability to control your emotions. We call emotion regulation skills. It's things like your ability to control your impulses. We call those self-regulation skills. It's flexible thinking skills, like your ability to take somebody else's perspective into account. It's social thinking skills, like you mentioned, empathy, one of the most complicated social thinking skills there is. And those are skills that can be built. They can all be built. And I'm not saying it's easy to build those, but one of the cool things about our approach is that process that we walked through where we did our little role play of the 3 ingredients. The skill building is built into that. So whether you knew it or not, as I was going through those 3 ingredients with you, you were asked to practice 20 odd skills that cut across those areas that I just described. All skills related to problem solving, flexibility, frustration tolerance, social interaction. You had to practice those skills. And what our research has shown, because we study everything we do here at Mass General Hospital, is our research has shown that when adults practice that process with kids, the kids develop those neurocognitive skills. Their skills get better by participating in that problem-solving practice. And perhaps my favorite finding from our research team is guess who else's skills in those different areas get better? You got it. Ours, the parents. We become more flexible, better empathizers, better problem solvers by virtue of practicing like this.
And then you said also earlier, you said that when someone's using a technique on you, it's like, when you detect someone's trying to use a technique, you just try and sprint the other way. So
Yes.
How you were talking to me in the role playing thing, it could sound like a concerned parent and whatnot. But if you're trying to use this in a relationship with, let's say I'm talking to, hypothetically, I have a younger brother who is on FanDuel and DraftKings a lot, hypothetically. If I were talking to him like that,
Yes.
oh, so that, he'd be like, dude, what's going on here?
Yeah. Well, right? So look, you need to make it your own. You need to use your own language. Doesn't have to be my words. But the other thing I tell people is, this is not a set of techniques. This is a process. Okay, like techniques, as we talked about, you can use on someone. Like I can use Plan A on someone, especially if I'm in a position of power when it comes to that. But you can't use Plan B on someone. You're doing it with someone. The way to protect against that is to just be transparent about it. Because your brother's probably going to be like, yeah, what the hell is this? Like, did you guys do some new podcast? Like, where'd you learn this, right? So, but the way you do that is you say, hey, you know what? I learned about this process that sounds pretty cool. It's not rocket science, but it's basically like, hey, I try to do a really good job of listening to where you're coming from with something that I'm worried about. And then I hope you'll listen to my perspective, why I'm worried about it. And then we put our heads together. So with that in mind, I wanted to talk to you about FanDuel, because dude, you are always on FanDuel. I'm a little worried about it. Like, what's going on? And use your own language. You've told them what you're going to do. And if it seems a little technique-y, okay, fine. You explain why you're doing it this way.
Yeah, that's good. And also, I think listeners could take that and you could apply it to whatever, a spouse, a significant other, a coworker.
You got it. Especially in relationships where there's some power differential, like in the workplace, when it's a supervisor or a manager and somebody that they manage, but also in what we call power neutral relationships with a spouse, a partner, a sibling, etc. And we've shown that it's just as effective in those contexts. And it works just as well when you're talking adult to adult. This is not just for developing kids.
How does CPS align with or differ from other therapeutic models like cognitive behavioral therapy or dialectical behavioral therapy?
So collaborative problem solving, some people would say that it belongs sort of under the heading of cognitive behavioral therapy because we are working with behavior and we are doing work focused on cognition, on thinking skills. But, I have to say that I think of it much more as sort of what we call an integrative approach, which is it has elements that are cognitive, it has elements that are behavioral, and it has elements that are what I would call interpersonal. I think if I had to describe the approach in sort of where it fits theoretically, I'd call it a relational approach because it's teaching people how to relate with one another more effectively. There are overlaps with things like dialectical behavior therapy, DBT, which is very focused on skills and skills in areas like emotion regulation, which we also focus on as well. And I'll tell you this, any therapy worth anything, it better do a good job of helping the helper develop a helping relationship with the helpee. Because as we talked about in the very beginning, it is the number one predictor of helping anybody change. I don't care what approach you use, collaborative problem solving, cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavior therapy, the let them theory, you name it, it's going to depend on whether you're creating a helping relationship with the person you're trying to help.
And that even like that relationship, helping in the sense of like they respect you or they feel like you're dialed in, like you actually care about the outcome.
Yeah, let me define it. Thank you for that. And this goes back to that first bit of research that I was doing in the beginning of graduate school, where we studied what's in clinical circles, it's called the therapeutic alliance. But if you take it outside of a clinical encounter between like a patient or a doctor and their patient, it's called not the therapeutic alliance, but the collaborative alliance or the working alliance or the helping alliance. Other people have called it the helping relationship. And what is it defined by? Non-judgmental acceptance and empathy working together on a common goal. That's what it is. So whatever you want to help somebody with and whoever they are, you better be in the business of listening hard, empathically, and non-judgmentally, and trying to collaborate with them, not impose your will, to work towards a goal that they care about as well. That's the definition of that helping alliance or helping relationship.
Got it. I was thinking about in the sports world, there's like certain coaches that you hear about or like I've had relationships with where I respect them so much. Like a coach that my dad and I both had, I respect, George O'Leary's name. I respect him almost more than anyone on the planet. So I never wanted to let him down, but I never thought I was going to get empathy or collaboration from him.
Well, so what made him so meaningful to you then?
He did everything. He pretty much did everything the right way. And he didn't just talk about it, he would live it. So he lived the hard work. He lived the dedication. He lived in the football world. He's like, his football IQ is through the roof and he's always studying, always learning. And he would tell you, how do I say it? Tough love is what people say, but it was as tough love gets, because he would say the most, what he would say, you'd be like, oh man, that hurt, but it was dead on. It's not like he would say it and pull any punches, but you knew he was right. And he wasn't saying it in a way to try to insult you. He was saying it like, hey, if you want, just so you know, this is a problem and you need to fix it. And you could, people would get, including myself, you could get mad in the moment when he said it, but then when you look back and you'd be like, man, he really is right.
Uh-huh. Well, so you'd be surprised to hear this, but the reason I wanted to describe that is I'm not hearing just tough love there. What I'm hearing is somebody who actually really felt like you had the capability to do better and wanted to help you get there. And their way of doing that was to speak real truth, but to let you know, like, that's what you need to do or work on if you want to get there. And, that is an aspect of a helping relationship. There's a goal that you're trying to work towards, and you think the person can get there, and you want to help them do that.
But there was so agree across the board, agree. but there was never, and there was never collaboration, and I never
Yeah.
even felt like there should be, because in the football world, he's dang near the pinnacle. So when he would
Yeah.
say something, it's like you knew to listen to him, but it wasn't like hey, what
Yeah.
do you think? Should we work on this together? It was like, hey, you got to
Right.
fix this.
Yeah.
Actually,
Well,
he would
and here,
say, though, he
and
would give you ways to do it, but it wasn't like, what do you think you should do?
yeah. Well, and look, that will work very well if somebody has the skills to make use of the information that you've provided them to work on those things. If they do not, it will not work so great.
True.
So, it's an important thing to point out here is that, again, I'm not suggesting, tough love is never effective, but tough love is not particularly effective when people don't have the skills to make use of tough love.
Doctor, I am a fanatical Christian of sorts, not in a judgmental way, because Jesus himself said not to judge other people. It seems like this method has a lot of Christian undertones to it. Can you see that? The whole every person wants to do well part.
That's interesting, Tim. Um, you know, honestly, I think that what underlies the message and the approach is sort of a belief in human goodness and a belief that everybody deserves the opportunity and the right to do well, and that people are capable of doing that. And I would imagine that those ideas are represented in various religions, sort of, in the best of ways, where they help bring people together.
What tools or resources do you recommend for individuals or organizations looking to adopt CPS?
So there's a lot of stuff that we have out there to try to support people who are learning collaborative problem solving. One sort of quick first step people can take is that they can take our thinking skill assessment. And as I mentioned before, you can take it for yourself, or you can fill it out thinking of somebody else in your life. Again, whether that's your child, your spouse, your mother-in-law, you name it. And you can start to familiarize yourself with the types of skills I'm talking about. And you can find that right on my personal website or the website of my program here at Mass General, which is called Think Kids. And for parents looking to learn this approach, there's just a ton of resources on that website, thinkkids.org. We have parent classes where parents learn this in groups of parents over time remotely with one of our trainers. We have asynchronous self-paced courses that people can take. We have some lots of free resources right on there. There's all kinds of things. And then organizations, schools, hospitals, treatment programs who really want to learn this and embed it deeply. There's a whole bunch of resources organized by the type of organization we're talking about right on that same website, and people can get in touch with us to learn all about training options. We have a whole training continuum. People can become trainers in their own organizations as well. There's a Train the Trainer program, and we have a lot of ways we assist organizations with implementation so that it's not just training, but actual implementation of the approach as well. So I encourage people to check out all those resources, as we would love to help. And there's also books out there about the approach in clinical settings, in schools. We have a curriculum for schools. And the book that cuts across all of it is called Changeable, that sort of touches upon what this looks like across settings. And those are available on audiobook as well.
Your book, Changeable, has been praised by thought leaders like Malcolm Gladwell and Adam Grant. What feedback or impact from readers has surprised you the most?
I have to say, what I'm continually surprised by is how powerful the mindset shift can be, and how that alone, even without learning about the sort of the tools and the process, how that can be a game changer for people. And it just opens their eyes to seeing the problem in a totally different way. And sometimes that's also where people come to see themselves in a very different way, where people have really struggled with their own behavior, maybe at home, at school, in the workplace. And it's like an epiphany that helps them view their own behavior through a much more humane, compassionate, empathic lens, and it can make a world of difference. And I got to say, I'm constantly reminded of the power of that in ways that even I had underestimated.
Looking back on your career, is there a particular moment or success story that you're most proud of?
It's a great question. And I think what I'm honestly most proud of is the fact that we've sort of built an organization at our program called Think Kids, which sort of is filled with a group of people who train others who all embrace a shared understanding and a passion, and people who practice what they preach. And I am really proud of the fact that we're constantly helping people to find more compassionate, collaborative ways to be with other people in the world. So I think more than any one sort of success story, it's that. And it's, every so often I will get a note from a parent who lets me know how they feel like these ideas have literally saved their child's life and rescued their family. And when you read those things, I got to tell you, I choke up immediately, and I think to myself, how fortunate am I to be in the position where my job is to get to try to help people like that. And we don't always do it. We're not always successful. But over time, I hear enough of those stories where I say, you know what, we're really leaving the world a better place as a result of this work. And saving one kid's life is enough. But knowing that you can touch so many families' lives like that, it's really inspiring, and I'm incredibly grateful to be able to do this work.
Is your goal, like, at scale, if just say every family in America did this tomorrow, everyone buys the book, reads it, and starts implementing it, is the thought that, again, it's just I guess, is it happiness? Is it problem solving skills? Is it relationship driven? Like, what is it that you mentioned obviously literally saving a kid. What is it that if you had to pick your number one goal with your mission?
So our mission, and my personal mission, is really to protect children's mental health and to help kids develop the skills to be able to thrive and to not sort of have obstacles in their life stand in their way as a result. And lately that work's been extended across the lifespan. So now I think of the broader mission is to help the world become better at solving problems in mutually satisfactory ways that leave all of us in a much better place.
You're the expert on kids. Do you have any of your own? If so, would you like to tell us about them? You should feel free to boast. And are they beneficiaries of your work?
So I do have 3 kids of my own, although just recently I think technically they've become adults. But I know with my own parents, they're always kids, right? And you're always a parent. Doesn't matter about the age. But yes, I have 2 boys and a girl, and let's see, they're all about to have birthdays. So they're going to be 26 and 23 and 19. And they are beneficiaries of the work. I tried not to use techniques on them, but to practice what I preach with them. I'm very fortunate to say that they're all doing incredibly well in the world, and they're great examples of, kids can be so different. Same parents, same environment, 3 completely different kids that have different sets of strengths and weaknesses. And it's a great example of, let your kids be who they are, because they've all got wonderful things to share with the world. And I feel very fortunate. And they make me look good, by the way. I don't take credit for it. They make me look better than I would think. They're wonderful kids.
Do they interact with each other using the collaborative approach on things? And did they when they were growing up?
They didn't necessarily always when they were growing up. My middle guy, sort of, that's how he operates in the world. So he always did. But they've grown closer and closer. And if Tim, the question you asked me about sort of my greatest, what I feel most satisfied with professionally, or you asked me that earlier. One of the things I feel most satisfied with personally is the relationship that my three kids have with one another. And I like to think that it has something to do with, what was modeled for them, but they're incredibly empathic, caring, collaborative with one another, support each other. It's a pretty beautiful thing to see. And again, I don't profess to take credit for it. It's nature and nurture, as we said.
Now on to our final word segment, where we ask our guests a few rapid fire questions. What was the happiest moment in your life?
Happiest moment of my life, probably when my first was born. No offense to my second or third, but that was the first.
What is the biggest adversity you've faced?
Biggest adversity I've had to overcome, I would say, is divorce, which is tough on all involved, and was tough on me as well.
What are you most excited about?
I'm most excited about watching my kids grow and what they do with their lives. The future is bright for all of them, and they're going in all kinds of different directions, and I sort of want to sit back and watch them fly.
What advice would you give to your younger self?
Advice I'd give to my younger self is pay attention to your feelings. When you're trying to accomplish a lot and you're very driven and things like that, you've got your eye on your goals all the time, which is great. But it's important to pay attention to your feelings, because your feelings let you know that there are things that you should be focused on as well. You should be paying attention to. And don't push those aside and just carry on. That's never going to serve you too well.
Okay. Second last one, a good opportunity here for a plug if you want to do it. Do you have any book recommendations for us or for the listeners?
Book recommendations. I do. I have some of my favorites. One of my favorites, a friend and colleague of mine, Dr. Bruce Perry, wrote with Oprah, actually, What Happened to You? Great book. We talk some about motivation, by the way, in this podcast. Check out Dan Pink's book, tiny little book called Drive that he wrote many years ago. Still a favorite of mine. I love that book. You asked me, I said I could do a plug here. So how can I not plug my own book? Check out Changeable for sure.
The name of our podcast is Nothing Left Unsaid. Do you have anything you want to say?
I think the last thing I want to say is one of the first things I said, which is people do well if they can. Remember that. We're all doing the best we can with the skills we have to handle what the world is throwing at us. And, the world throws a lot more at some people than others. And it's pretty amazing to see the human spirit and resilience and what people can handle. But everybody's doing the best they can with the skills they have. Remember that with the people in your lives. And remember that and apply it to yourself. We're all doing the best we can with the skills we have. And I really appreciate you having me on the podcast. It's great to meet you both. Tim, thank you for inspiring so many with the work that you're doing. And it's been a pleasure talking to you guys.
Dr. Ablon, before we let you go, I got to ask one more question. At the end of every podcast, we ask all our guests, who are one or two people you know personally that you think we should have on the podcast?
People you should have on the podcast personally. Oh, gosh. Some of the people I just described, they may be tough to get, honestly, but like Bruce Perry is fantastic. He'd be phenomenal. Another person you might want to, and Dan Pink would also be phenomenal. He's tough to get these days. You might want to check out Mark Brackett too. Just my answer to that question about sort of what would I tell my younger self. He's like the feelings guy now. He wrote this book called Permission to Feel, which is an interesting one. So you could check out his work as well.
Awesome. Those are great ones. Thanks so much for coming on. Great meeting you. And I'm going to go try and implement the option B here with 4 kids.
Good luck. Let me know if you need help. It was a pleasure meeting you all, and I look forward to seeing how this comes up and comes out. And keep up your great work. Okay.
Will do. And next time if we go out to MGH, I'll shoot you a message too, and we can meet.
Oh yeah, let me know. I'd love to meet you guys in person. That'd be great.
Awesome. Thank you.
Today's episode is brought to you by the ALS Investment Fund, a specialized biotech venture capital investment firm focused on neurodegenerative diseases, particularly ALS. They manage a large and diversified worldwide portfolio of ALS-related companies, collaborating with a global network of scientists, clinicians, foundations, and patient advocates to accelerate therapeutic development, investing for a world without ALS. Discover more about their mission and impact at alsinvestmentfund.com. If you enjoyed today's episode, consider supporting the podcast for free by subscribing on your favorite podcast platform, leaving a review, and sharing it with your friends. Your support means the world to us. This episode of Nothing Left Unsaid is brought to you by 11 Labs. Their groundbreaking technology makes a huge difference, and we're grateful for their support. To learn more, visit 11labs.io. A substantial portion of our sponsorship proceeds go to tackleals.com, funding cutting-edge ALS research. If you'd like to join the fight and contribute, visit tackleals.com. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time on Nothing Left Unsaid.